tonight's speaker is, and I'm really thrilled to have him because it's something that I'm interested in too, is Stephen Kennedy. He's the Assistant Sumter County Administrator. He's Bradley Arnold's right-hand man. And he's going to really give us some good information. Thank you for coming, Stephen.
Everybody can hear me? Yes. This one? This one better? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, again, thanks for having me. My name is Stephen Kennedy. I'm the Assistant County Administrator for Sumter County. I've been with the county since 2011. I came on board as the Deputy Chief of the Fire Department. I spent time here at Village's Public Safety Department as a station lieutenant for many years. So I'm very familiar with the area. I've spent about 20 plus years in Sumter County alone in public safety. About 2 years ago, I took on the role of Public Safety Director. That position has since gone away, and I've now taken on as the Assistant County Administrator. So some of the responsibilities that fall to me, some of the divisions that I handle are Animal Services, Mosquito Control, Emergency Management. Sumter County Fire and EMS reports to me, the 911 centers, not the Sheriff's Department directly, but I support the 911 centers in terms of infrastructure, which is what I'm here to talk about today as far as 911. Who else do we have? So Fleet Services and Transit. So that's the majority of what I have. It's about 50% of the county workforce is what I look at. And with that, a big portion of what I do is all revolves around public safety. I spent time as a sworn police officer in Florida, as well as a firefighter and a paramedic, so I'm very focused on supporting public safety. I'd like to give you a little bit of an idea of what's happening in Sumter County in terms of 911. Hopefully maybe answer a few questions and spend about maybe 20 minutes or so and give you all some opportunity for any questions you might have. So with that, we'll kind of get going forward here. I wanted to give you an overview of the 911, what's in Sumter County. I don't know if you're familiar, everybody knows where the Dome building is, where the service center is on Powell Road. If you're not familiar, if you look behind that, and essentially to the south of the building, we now have a two-story building that's been there about 2 years now. That's our public safety center. So the Sheriff's Department operates out of there. Our county fire department has their administrative headquarters there. We also have our public safety center in terms of dispatch services. So Sumter County Sheriff's Department is the primary public safety answering point in Sumter County, which means if you dial 911 in Sumter County, that is who you're speaking to. So the first call is picked up by them, and then following that, they'll ask you a few questions, and I'll cover that in a little bit more detail. Yes?
You can't read that.
Turn the lights down.
Turn the lights down here.
Yeah, that may help a little bit, but there's nothing on there that I'm not going to tell you. Okay? I promise. I promise. So with that, on the slide it says the Village of Sumter County Public Safety Center, which is the complex that I'm talking about on Powell Road. Great, thank you very much whoever did that. And then the Sheriff's Department is the primary PSAP, and then we have what's called a secondary PSAP, which handles all of our fire and emergency medical services, and that's contracted out, it's part of our ambulance service contract. So American Medical Response, who does our transport service, also provides the 911 secondary dispatch center. And then following, the third item we have is what's called a backup 911 center. Believe it or not, Sumter County, up until the last year, did not have a fully dedicated backup 911 center. And we now do. And that's located in Bushnell, Florida. The primary center is up here in Wildwood. So we have what's called geodiversity, meaning that if for some reason this building went offline, our main building, we have an exact copy of it, much, much smaller, not nearly the amount of bells and whistles, but it's functional. It will operate for all purposes so that we can relocate to that center. This is a quick inside glimpse of what our public safety center looks like. The picture that's on your left-hand side is what one of our telecommunicators looks at on their console each day. So they have about 5 or 6 screens that they operate. A couple of them are related to 911, one's related to radio, and then they have what's called a computer-aided dispatch, or CAD. That's a couple of the other screens that are involved. The right-hand side gives you a picture of what the actual center looks like. This happens to be the fire and EMS side. There are, capacity-wise, we have 22 operational 911 positions in that building. But it's built with the intention, as many of the conversations have been about growth in this county, it has been built with the anticipation of growth. We have capacity for up to 44 positions down the road. So it was designed with that infrastructure in mind so that we don't have to go back and replace it or spend a lot of money doing upgrades down the road. From a 911 perspective, just to give you an idea of how many calls we receive at that center in terms of 911 calls, from 2009 to 2016, we've gone from about 40,000 calls a year to roughly just shy of 60,000 a year. That's a lot of 911 calls to handle. That doesn't include all of the non-emergency calls that come in, which is easily double that. So by the time you turn around, our call center is answering realistically well into the 100 to 150,000 calls a year for service. So one of the questions that's going to come up at some point is, what's the big deal about 911 and how things work? And one of the questions is you need to know that there's different classes of services that are out there. The first is the wired service. So for everybody who's had a phone that plugs into a wall, we're going to call that a wired phone for the most part, right? It makes a big difference when we talk about how you access 911. There's a significant difference in how that works. The second point is called wireless, which is, anybody here ever heard of a cell phone or have one? Yeah, I have to carry two, right? So that's enough of a challenge on its own. Well, you'll see in a moment what that's meaning, how that's impacting us as a 911 center. Then there's this thing called voice over internet protocol. So many of you who have a cable service provider that provides your phone service, or ever heard of a thing called Magic Jack? Anybody ever heard of that? Okay, so Magic Jack is another great example of that. They're all treated differently in how they access the 911 system. And then there's a thing called multi-line telephone service. I only mention this because this plays into things like hotels and facilities like that maybe have a different series of phones connected into the same building. There are specific laws related to that now that deals with how they access 911. And believe it or not, these things really, really make a big difference. There's a law called Carey's Law, which is directly related to the fact that it's a very sad story of a young woman who was involved in a situation in a hotel, and her daughter tried to dial 911 four times and could not get out of the hotel, and she ended up being essentially murdered at that point. And they passed a law related to Carey's Law, which is now about how to ensure that you can direct dial 911 services. So that's a big deal that's out there. On top of that, there's another act that's called the Ray Baum's Act, which is basically dispatchable locations. Dispatchable locations is going to be a piece that I talk about as we move into what's the big deal with the new version of 911. Anybody know when the first 911 call was made? Pop quiz?
1911.
1911, not quite. All right, so I would say 51 years ago. Okay? 51 years ago was the first 911 call. Do you think the technology's changed in our world?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, do you think the technology of how you dial 911's changed? Not so much. We'll talk about that a little bit. Not so much. So that's a big deal as we move forward. When I talked about how things are changing in terms of how you call 911, you'll see that in this slide here, you see that the red is your wireless mobile cellular phone carriers, right? And then the blue is what you call your wired ones, which is your plug in the wall. You notice a trend there? Yeah. It's going away. Your phone that plugs in the wall is going away in terms of how often that's utilized as a means to access 911. That's a major impact in how we process your calls for requests for service so that we can get you assistance for whether it's a law enforcement, a fire, or a medical emergency. So let's talk about how calls occur in 911 right now. So today, we have in this county, we have what's called enhanced 911. So the original 911 back in the day was you dialed 911 and we got basically a phone number and not a whole lot more. You know, you could get what was called an Annie or an Alley spill, which you'd get a little bit of information in terms of the phone number, and you get a little information in terms of the location. And basically everything was done by the phone number assigned, right? So there's a thing it's called a Master Street Address Guide, or an MSAG. What that means is when you register your phone number and you have 352-555-1212 is your phone number, when that rings through the system, we get a pop-up on our screen that says that phone number is registered to 123 Main Street. And that's how we validate your address, right? What's important is that the phone number is driving the location. That worked then, and then we came out with wireless phone calls, right, which gave a little bit more of a challenge, and we moved into essentially an enhanced version of 911, which is when you dial 911, what we get for an address, the first address we get is the cell phone tower that you're calling, that your phone is bouncing off of. That's not where you are, not even remotely close, but it is at least the first piece of information we get. That's what we call phase 1. And then we can do a phase 2 request, and what that is, it's a best effort of the phone and the towers that are around to essentially triangulate where you are. And it's a best effort. So that might mean your neighborhood, it might mean within 5 miles, we don't know, but it's an effort. And I'll give an example of what this looks like in a minute. So that's a little bit different. The VoIP calls, I only want to touch on that on one quick point because a lot of times I get asked the question of, well, if I dial 911 and my home address is in Seattle, Washington, and I'm here for part of the year, am I going to dial Seattle, Washington 911 when I'm in Florida? And the answer is, you shouldn't. You might. And I'll give you the example of how you can so that you can protect yourself, okay? Voice over Internet Protocol requires you to register where you are. It's really important. If you dial 911 and you're just dialing 911 from your mobile phone, you're going to end up either here or Lake County, depending if you're on the borderline of the counties, or Marion or something like that, but most likely you're going to end up here. The problem runs in is that if you connect with wireless, like your Wi-Fi signal, you connect that to a internet router in a building, whatever address you associated with Wi-Fi is where you're going to call. And that's important because things like Magic Jack and products like that require you to register where you are located. You got to make sure that you update that if you move to a different location. So that's my only piece on voice over Internet Protocol to be wary of. So that's how we do things now, but where are we going? Because you're going to hear some terminology like next generation 911. So where are we heading to next? Next generation 911 relies on location services. That is the change. That is the big push. That is the next era of evolution for phone services for us and for accessing 911. And what that means is that on your phone you actually have a location, typically your latitude and longitude, your GPS signal. We don't get that normally. But once we actually register you, once we actually get this service completely integrated, wherever you are standing is what's going to be transmitted to us. Your 911 call won't be routed by your phone number. It'll be routed by where your boots are standing at that exact moment. That is a major, major difference in technology. It's a huge advancement forward for everybody in this country, but especially for us here in Sumter County. So with that, geographic information systems is a big part of it. And I want to give you an idea of where we are in Sumter County with Next Gen 911 services. So the first thing, anybody heard of text and 911 services? Did you know that you have text and 911 available to you in Sumter County?
Yes.
We do. And we have for about, right about a year now. February of last year was about when we went live. So that's a significant factor. So there's a couple things with that. One, it's all obviously people associated with, well, there's a bad scenario and somebody's, holding you hostage and you need to text. Sure, that's a scenario you would use it in. We would prefer that you call 911. But quite frankly, there's a lot of individuals around the country and certainly in the community that maybe have, hearing impediments, and they use text to communicate. Well, that's typically been called a TTY back in the day with the telephone stuff, but reality is you can actually text 911 now if you need help. Just understand that it's not quite as fast, and that's only because we're now texting instead of talking. But it gets right there and it rings in our center just like a 911 call. The next thing that we did was in order to become, I told you that GIS, Geographic Information Services, is so important because we need to know where you're standing. We embarked on a project last year to initiate an improvement in our GIS services, and one of the things we did is we created what's called a community layer. So I hear a lot of things about the villages in general, but one of the problems we had is when you dialed 911 and it popped up on a screen, it said the villages, or for some of you who have maybe a Lady Lake postal code, that's what we got on our screen was, Lady Lake or 32159 or something like that. What we've actually done is we've gone down for every community that's here. So if you live in the village of Winifred or you live in the village of Bonita, whatever it is, that shows up on our 911 screen when you call 911. That's important because as the villages has grown and it's such a large community, it's important for our first responders to get a general idea of well, am I taking a left or a right at this intersection? Because it's going to make a difference in my response time. So that was a big piece that we did. We started and we completed in July. We did a GIS synchronization that's required for next generation 911. When we started off, our synchronization rate was extremely low. We actually just completed back in October. We are at 100% match rate for our synchronization between our phone number, our MSAG, which is our phone number database, and our GIS database. That's a big deal because in order to go next generation 911, they recommend a 98% match. We've surpassed that, and we're maintaining it, and we're maintaining it every month. So I'm super excited about that. The next piece is what's called EZINet, which is an emergency services internet provider. What that means, or internet system, basically it is a 911 internet loop, for internet services that's restricted to public safety and only used to communicate from public safety answering point to public safety answering point. We signed an agreement with CenturyLink Services to bring that to Sumter County by the close of September of this current fiscal year. So September 2020, we will be completely set and done with our next generation 911 core services so that we are prepared as soon as other locations start transmitting the data in terms of their actual location. Their GIS service will already be built and ready to receive that information. Doesn't mean that every provider is going to send that to us yet, because your wireless carriers are different, right? Some of them are Sprint, Verizon, whatever, and then you use different phones. But I'm going to give you an example of what the difference is between old technology and where we're going. So Rapid SOS is a provider out there now that warehouses, when you dial 911, Apple and Android have both communicated with this company, and they're sending your calls through there. And about 40% of the calls come back with a location associated with them. This is a true 911 call, and if you're familiar with the incident, it is what it is. The building itself is the Waterfront Inn. Everybody familiar with where that's at? Yeah. Okay. So if you look at the yellow dot, the yellow icon there, when we got the 911 call, our best guess at phase 2 location services provided the location as being where that yellow dot is. So as our responders are pulling up to the building, you can imagine they're going to walk in the front entrance of the hotel. They're going to walk up to somebody and say, hey, we're here for that emergency. Where's the patient? And the hotel's going to go, what are you talking about? We're not familiar with the problem. And you can imagine how that delays access to people, right? At the same time, we were using Rapid SOS, which is next generation 911 technology. And if you look at where the green dot is, that's where the green dot showed the patient. If you look at the red dot, that's where the patient was who was coming in or had just come in from boating out on the lake and was dialing 911 because they were having an event as they were pulling in, as they were getting closer to shore. That type of location sensitivity, to be aware of where you are, makes the difference. The next step going forward is even this building where it has Wi-Fi in the building, your phone is going to, even if it doesn't connect, it's going to know you're near it. We'll be able to tell that you dialed 911 and you're in whatever building you're in. We can tell you what floor you're on, what room you're in. Though that technology is here today, we're just in the final stages of being able to roll that out to you. From a call processing, when you dial 911, a lot of people get very anxious on the phone. And if anything, if you walk away with anything tonight, please take this as the most important piece I can give you. Understand that our telecommunicators are state certified 911 telecommunication call takers. Okay? They are the best of the best. And I would put that up against anyone. There's a lot of, I'm sure, retired law enforcement and probably some dispatchers in here and fire and EMS. I guarantee you that I would put our folks up against anybody. They are the top of that are out there. Be patient with them, though. They're going to ask you some really important questions. A lot of the time we hear, well, just send somebody. We've been on the phone with you. Call processing is something we measure on the fire and EMS side every day. Call processing means from the time you dial 911 and we picked up the phone, how long does it take us to have somebody responding to you? Or at least dispatch to you, right? So you get on the phone and say, I have a problem. Where are you? I'm at such and such address, Main Street. What's your phone number? This is my phone number. Confirm your address one more time. What is the problem? That takes about 40 seconds to do it right, and we do it right a lot. Once that's done, it takes about 20 seconds to actually confirm the dispatchable units, and we dispatch the units out. So in 60 seconds, that closest fire station and ambulance is being notified. And in about 60 seconds after that, they're responding to the call. But we're still on the phone with you. Anybody ever dial 911 and actually have a fire truck or ambulance show up while you're still on the phone? That's how that works, folks, okay? So once we get past those first few questions, we're going to say, okay, we need to ask you a few more things here. Stay on the phone. Don't get impatient with us. This gives you an idea that what we're doing right now, 80% of the time is the benchmark. That's a national benchmark of what we should be doing. We're doing it right now 87.3% of the time, and then 97% of the time, within 106 seconds, we dispatch somebody to you. So what do you need? What do you expect when you call 911? First thing is you're going to get the sheriff's department. Do you need police, fire, EMS? That's an easy answer. I need EMS. They're not going to say anything else. They're not going to debate it with you. They're not going to ask you a whole lot of questions. They're going to push a button, and you're going to get another operator that's going to say, where's your emergency? And at that point, just give them the address. They're not going to be able to tell for sure by the phone number where you are. Give them the benefit of the doubt, give them the address. They'll confirm that address with you. As long as the address matches, they'll say it at least twice. That's our requirement, that you say it once and you verify it the second time, right? Once we've got that, we ask basically who you are, what's your phone number, especially if we get disconnected from it, we need to make sure that that phone number is right. Sometimes, believe it or not, you just move from one house to the other and you move the phone, the addresses might not match up. We need to get the phone number, okay? As soon as that happens, we're going to say essentially, what's going on? My loved one fell. That ends the interrogation part of that. They're going to ask you a whole lot more questions, but that sends enough information for us to notify the first units to respond to you. That purple box there, we're dispatching people. After that, though, we're going to stay on the phone and do what's called an EMD or EFD. That's an emergency medical dispatch or emergency fire dispatch. They're going to ask you a lot of questions, but believe it or not, they will actually even provide direction for you. They will provide CPR instructions. Even the people who've never done CPR in their lives, we get that. Well, why did you tell them to do CPR? They weren't trained. Well, it's the worst time of their lives. If this is the only option, we have trained people who can teach you over the phone how to do CPR. And we've been successful with that. So I'm telling you, these folks are trained professionals. Please, try to work with them. Almost done, folks. Two things to cover. Anybody here ever heard of Smart 911? I only saw one hand go up. No more? Okay, so when you leave here, two hands. I saw one in the back. When you leave here, please consider Smart 911. The Vial of Life is an awesome thing, and continue to do that. The challenge, though, is you're not always home, folks. All right? So when something bad happens, if you register with Smart 911, you can actually associate your phone number and anybody else in your household. And you can register on there and you can put all the important things like what's your medications, what's your allergies, what's your history, who's your contacts if something is important or something happens, who should they contact? What's your home address? When I showed the example of the phone number, the map with the waterfront inn and the location wasn't exact. Imagine how nice this is when we have a 911 call for somebody and we don't know where you are. You've dialed 911, we can hear somebody trying to breathe but gasping on the phone. You can't tell us where you are because you had a stroke or something bad has happened, but we can look at their Smart 911 profile, what pops up right on our screen in our comm center, and we can go, hey, I don't know who this is, but this phone number is registered to an address within a block of where we're going. Have somebody go knock on the door there and see what's going on. It's a huge opportunity for you to be able to enable us to help you. And how much is it? It's free. Who doesn't like free, right? It's free. It's an important tool that we can pass on, but it's another tool in the toolbox. It doesn't replace anything else out there. It's just another tool for you to consider. So neighboring counties that use it, I know Lake County uses it. I don't know if Marion County uses it or not at this point, but I know that Lake County does for sure, and they have. And how do you register? You just go to smart911.com and register right there. And again, it's free, folks. This is what shows up. This is what it looks like on our dispatch screen. We actually see, if you have a picture, if you've had anybody who's, unfortunately, maybe they have some mental issues, capacity issues where they forget things and they walk off and they wander. This is a great opportunity, folks. We can have a picture right here. We can grab that picture and send it to the law enforcement officers right in the vehicle as they're responding to the call. that John has wandered off today. We don't know where he went to. He was last seen 2 hours ago. What does he look like? Boom, we can push this right out to them, where back in the day, you'd have to go to the person's house, get a hold of that picture, bring it back to the police station, and then try to distribute it out that way. So it's a huge advantage for us. Anybody here heard of Pulse Point? Okay, so more hands. That's good. So what is Pulse Point? Pulse Point was designed with the intent to essentially allow communities to become first responders to help others that are in need, specifically related to a cardiac event, some sort of significant event in the field. How do you get it? It's free. Go to the App Store, whether it's iPhone or Android, whatever. Download the app. Again, it's free. You can register and you can see what calls are transpiring in your community, but you can actually enable it to notify you that an event has occurred, and it doesn't tell you about every single event. It doesn't notify you for every event. It notifies you for a CPR alert. It actually notifies you if you're within a reasonable geographic vicinity of that call. So figure, let's say a half mile. If you're within that range, it'll notify you that there's an active request for help in that area. So that picture is your community that's following Sumter County, and we cover both Sumter County Fire as well as the village's public safety department. Those are not verified. Those are responders that are registered with Pulse Point now. So there's a lot of people out there that can help. I'm very pleased to announce, nobody in the public has heard it. There's only been one other member of the community that I've talked to about it, but I'll mention it tonight. We have what's called the Verified Responder Program that's in the process of being rolled out, which is through Pulse Point. And the difference with that is Pulse Point was designed with public areas in mind. So if something happens at Lowe's or something like that, you would be notified nearby and you could go help. Bless you. The Verified Responder Program actually is going to allow us to be able to verify who the registered responder is, and you'll actually be able to get locations to even private addresses, and you'll actually get turn-by-turn directions delivered that way. So it's a huge step forward for us to be able to enable the community to help us and help themselves, and I'm pleased to say that that's coming, and you should see more of that in the very near future. So my shameless plug, Pulse Point, it's a big deal for us. It's how our county supports the ADs, communities that are out there. Smart 911, please take a look at it, and help your other responders that are out there.